forgotten to put that on my notes, but had him set it up for me. Okay, now we'll be in the book of Genesis today. We're getting close to the end of our study in the book of Genesis. Today we're in chapter 46 and 47. You know, there's only 50 chapters, so you know we're getting to the end. It's been a good time studying through the book of Genesis, and we'll continue into Exodus. I mean, I'm certainly not going to be, as we are in Exodus, talking about all the laws or any of that, which were a shadow of things to come. Probably be able to, highlight some of it along the way. But I really want to learn about how God worked with His people. And that's really what we've been doing in Genesis. We're learning how God has worked with His people from the very beginning, and how He has brought forth His life using people who are imperfect. And boy, there's nowhere you can see that more clearly than in Jacob's family. But God used them in an amazing way to release life into the world. So today, last week we studied where Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. He had tested them. He had found out that their character had changed. He trusted them now, and so he revealed himself. In fact, he couldn't hold it back any longer after Judah said, "Hey, keep me here, send Benjamin home. I will give up the rest of my life." Here's a man in his 40s saying, "I will give up the rest of my life. I will be your slave if you'll just let my brother Benjamin go home to his father, because my father will die if he doesn't see his son Benjamin come home." And when Joseph saw that amazing change, remember, Judah's the one who had the idea to sell Joseph into slavery to begin with, some 20 years earlier. So now Joseph sees the complete change in his brothers, and he is overcome, and he reveals himself to them. And then he comes up as he's telling them who he is and telling them not to be afraid. He says, "Hey, we're moving you down here to the land of Goshen so that you are able to survive the next 5 years of famine." The 7 years of plenty that Joseph had predicted because of Pharaoh's dream, those 7 years of plenty have already passed. They're 2 years into the famine. They have 5 years to go. And that is still unfolding in their region. And so he said, the only way you're going to survive this is if you move here for a season. Now remember, God had told Abraham that his descendants would be in a strange land for 400 years. And so they're well aware of the fact that part of their history is going to be spent outside the land of Canaan. It's just that none of them wants to press that boundary unless it's really the Lord. So as they started to travel, they got as far as Beersheba, and Jacob encountered the Lord. Now last week I pointed out the Lord shows up and says to Jacob, "Hey, you can go down to Egypt. This is me. Go down there. And Joseph himself is going to place his hands on your eyes," an idiom for closing your eyes when you pass. And, very, very touching picture. But I asked a really important question last week. Anytime during those 22 years that Joseph has been missing from Jacob's life, couldn't God have said, "Hey, by the way, he's alive in Egypt"? And I'm just saying, pay attention to stuff like that, because his ways are not our ways. He thought this is okay for Jacob for 22 years to think his son Joseph was dead. And he probably didn't think it's okay, but he did not interrupt it. And maybe he tried, but Jacob couldn't receive it because he had received the testimony of his sons that Joseph had been torn to pieces, or at least that's the evidence they brought. Okay, so now they're about to leave Beersheba. Today, we are going to talk about, we're going to see that the Lord provides them their temporary refuge. The temporary refuge turned out to be 430 years. That's quite the temporary refuge. We're celebrating the 250th year of the United States this coming summer, right? And that'd be like saying, yeah, this is just our temporary refuge. after 250 years. When you've been around someplace for 430 years, you no longer think about it as a temporary refuge, but that's all it is. It's a place of sojourning. And the Lord had told them that through Abraham right away. So we are in chapter 46, verses 5 through 7. We're going all the way into chapter 47, verse 6 today, so I think we're going to be able to make it. Then Jacob arose and set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel transported their father Jacob, their little children and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to take him. They took their livestock, their possessions which they acquired in the land of Canaan, and they arrived in Egypt. Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and the sons of his sons with him, his daughters and the daughters of his sons, and all his seed which he brought with him to Egypt. Okay, he brought his whole family. That's what it's saying. He's lock, stock, and barrel. All his family is going with him to Egypt. And so this was after the Lord had spoken to him. And Pharaoh had said, hey, I'm sending wagons to help you transport all your stuff. Because, of course, moving from one country to the next in that day and age, it wasn't as easy as just calling father and son movers, And so Pharaoh says, here, take these wagons, and you go up there and you put everything that you can into these wagons. And then Pharaoh said, if you can't fit it in the wagons, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you down here. I mean, he really did not want anything to stop them from transporting down. That's how much Joseph meant to Pharaoh. He thought, if this will make Joseph happy, I'm going to make Joseph happy. And by the way, we're going to see a story next week about why Pharaoh would want to make Joseph happy. He made Pharaoh a very rich and very powerful man. So anyway, they put the wagons to use. He transported everything. And now all of Jacob's people are in Egypt. Okay. These are the names of the sons of Israel who arrived in Egypt, including Jacob and his sons. Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob. The sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamim, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Puva, Yab, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, and Jehiel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she gave birth to for Jacob and Paddan Aram, and also his daughter Dinah. All the souls that were his sons and daughters totaled 33 from Leah. Okay. That's a lot. Just in one generation. Okay. So we're getting the list of everyone who's going down. Now, I'm going to tell you right up front, good luck with the list. Okay, because, as you count, you're going, wait a minute, there's daughters, but they don't seem to count the daughters, and there's obviously some daughters they don't mention because, they had a lot more daughters than just the ones they're mentioned, and then, so there's, as you try to figure out this list and say who were they counting and who weren't they counting, like I said, good luck. And then there's a discrepancy, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So anyway, and Onan are in the list. Did they count them or didn't they? Appears that they did, but they didn't come. They were buried up in Canaan. So, okay. They had Dinah at the end. Don't know if they counted her for sure. But there were 33 souls in all as they were on their way down. Now, this is going to end up with a total of 70. 70 was an important number in the book of Genesis. It spoke about the table of nations. It spoke about a couple of different times where 70 shows up at significant points. And so it might be more about saying this is one of those epoch-changing events that is taking place right now as Jacob goes down and they make it fit. By the way, they didn't have a Western mindset. If you look at Matthew chapter 1, it says, all the souls from this guy to this guy, all the generations were 14, right? There's three sets of 14 generations in Matthew chapter 1. Here it's 14 generations, 14 generations, and 14 generations. Matthew is writing so that everyone knows, hey, there's an even number of generations. But in order to get that, he had to skip generations. By the way, normal. Okay, because you could call someone the son of someone who was really the grandson of someone. That's normal. Okay, you can do that in Hebrew. You can do that in Greek. And so he wasn't stretching things. He was just making it fit what he wanted it to say. And so when you read that, you go, okay, their mindset wasn't like ours. If we're going to say these are the numbers, we're going to have our calculators out. That's our Western mindset. They're going to have their spiritual ears on. What does this mean? What does it mean? What is that I'm about to write? So, anyway, all the children of Leah came down. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggi, Shuni, Exbon. There's a name you could give one of your kids. Exbon. Eri, Arodi, and Areli. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, and Sarah and their sister. The sons of Beriah were Heber and Malchiel. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to his daughter Leah, and she gave birth to these 16 souls for Jacob. Okay, so Laban gave Zilpah to Leah. Now you start thinking about this. Okay, 33 and now another 16. It seems like Leah is probably the overall winner of the Who Has the Most Kids award. Okay, in their thing, because counting her servant. So when Jacob had to divide up everyone when he was about to meet Esau, and he set them all in their groups, some of the groups were smaller than other groups. Rachel was just Joseph and Benjamin. So this is Zilpah's family line. Not a whole lot to say about that, except, she was pretty prolific along with Leah. The sons of Rachel, the wife of Jacob, were Joseph and Benjamin. To Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, gave birth to for him. The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ahi, Rosh, Muppim, Huppim. And it'd probably be pronounced with more of an E, Mupim and Hupim. And Ard. These were the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob, all the souls total 14. So in order to get a group out of this one, they have to go all the way to the grandsons. Okay, they have to, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Anyway, excuse me. But, Benjamin, I can guarantee you, remember, Benjamin was a young lad. You understand all through the story? Benjamin hadn't had all these kids yet. Okay, Benjamin was going to have a lot of these kids when he's in Egypt. However, it's very clear if Benjamin, who is going to have these children, is walking into the land, and children are known as seed, he's got the seed in him. So he's bringing it along into Egypt. That's their mindset. So this is Rachel's family line. And then the sons of Dan, Husham. He didn't have a lot of children. The sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Guni. You could make a movie about that, Goonies. Jazer and Shillem. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to his daughter Rachel, and she gave birth to these for Jacob. All the souls totaled 7. Okay, so Bilhah comes in at the end without quite the number of children that everyone else did. And so we got through that genealogy pretty well. All the souls who arrived with Jacob in Egypt, who came forth from his own loins, not counting the wives of the sons of Jacob, all the souls totaled 66. The sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2 souls. All the souls from the house of Jacob who arrived in Egypt totaled 70. Now, like I said, have fun walking through that list and trying to figure it out, especially if you have to realize that the 2 sons of Judah didn't make it. But it gets even more interesting because it says 70 souls total, and in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew, which was translated 250 years before Christ, they write the word 75 souls. They count it different than we think the Septuagint counted the Ephraim's grandkids in order to come up with 75. Don't really know, but in the book of Acts, when Stephen says 75 in all, he's making his defense before the Sanhedrin. He is saying, hey, and there were 75 in all. He was quoting the Septuagint. Exactly. So it's just the way it is. They have a difference. There's some, let me see what I have in my notes. It might be too complicated to read. Different counting methods were used. The most straightforward explanation is that the two traditions simply counted different people, and that's probably exactly what happened. They were counting different. There are, by the way, different genealogies of the sons of Jacob and of their kids, and they do add names that could make it back into this list and add to the number. So it's not really a big deal, but it's fun noting. Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to act as a guide to Goshen before him. When the family arrived in the land of Goshen, Joseph made his chariot ready and went up to meet his father Israel in Goshen. When he presented himself to him, he fell upon his neck and wept on his neck for quite some time. Israel said to Joseph, I am willing to die since I am now seeing your face, for you are still alive. Okay, this is almost an antiseptic description of something that had to be highly emotional. I mean, I can't imagine Joseph or his father. I mean, it says they wept, but this was an amazing reunion. So it says Judah was sent to bring Joseph to Jacob. What this is the Hebrew's a little bit odd here, but this is what it is saying. See that red line? That's Jacob and his family coming into Egypt. We don't know where Goshen was. It kind of disappeared from history. You can understand why the Egyptians would want to erase it from history. It was a source of major pain to them 430 years later. So it had lost its whatever it was. So everyone assumes it was on the northeast side. By the way, Egypt is, especially in that day and age, is a country that lives along a river. Because the rest of it's desert. Just a few miles to the west of the Nile, desert. A few miles to the east of the river, desert. And so, the area that has the most is where all the deltas are up on the top and the river splits and all of that happens. And they assume one of those areas up there was Goshen. The other thing we don't know is where Joseph lived, but he would have been wherever the center of power was, and it wasn't Goshen. So when they got into the area, they knew how to get to Goshen. There were probably road signs that said Goshen, 70 miles, whatever. And so as they get close now, and probably they get to Goshen, they say to Judah, you go and get Joseph and bring him to us. Because they're not going to go all the way out of the way with all of their families and everything to go down to wherever Joseph is. They're going to Goshen. They're taking their whole families to Goshen, and they're not going to go out of the way and go way south in order to be by Joseph. They're going to have Joseph come to them. And then later on, when Joseph wants to introduce him to Pharaoh, he only brings a couple of his brothers to Pharaoh because it's a long journey, or this is work. You don't bring your whole family at that time. So anyway, that's what happened is they came down, and then they got to Goshen or close to it. They sent Judah to bring Joseph to Jacob. Now, there was a song that we sang today that really speaks. By the way, Judah's, from this point on, an amazing, prophetically pointed out man. He had this major responsibility of going to Joseph and then bringing him back to meet Jacob. And he's the one that sold Joseph into slavery. And while we were singing, Jacob was singing a song today that said, while you speak, or when you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. And it just struck me. And that really is true. We focus on failures. We can say, Judah he was messed up, okay? What kind of failure was he involved in? Well, let's see, he sold Joseph into Egypt as a slave. He, was going to withhold his last son, Sheila, from the wife of his other two children, who had died, and that was against the law and ritual of the time, and so he was going to not do that. When his own wife died, he went and slept with someone he thought was a prostitute. We're not talking about a guy who's racking up lots of successes. And yet God's going to make him the royal line of Israel from whom the Savior comes. Because when God speaks, 100 billion failures disappear. And, I'm just going to pause there a moment, because sometimes we believe our failures disqualify us to be used by God. You just don't read the scriptures very closely if you believe that, okay? There are certainly some things that'll get you in trouble, okay? And God will hold you to account for it. But God's also the God of second chances. And when we repent, the failures disappear. And sometimes, even after we've repented, we think, but that will hold me back. That will stop me from being able to go forward into whatever the call and purpose of God is. And you just need to look at the scriptures and realize that's not true. God is in the business of using cracked pots, okay, vases. That's all we are. We're all vessels, and we're made out of clay. And he doesn't have any that aren't cracked. And so he uses what he has, and he makes our failures work in our character development. And as long as we can rise above the failures, he can use this. And what I mean is the disappointment of it, the overshadowing nature of it, whatever. I think of King David, who had, a major failure. He committed adultery with Bathsheba. He killed her husband. The Lord says, okay, because you've made a mockery out of me before the people of Israel, I'm going to require your son's life. And David lays on his face until the young man dies, because he's hoping God will change his mind. And when he gets up, and now no one wanted to tell him that the young man had died. When he gets up, they're afraid to tell him, because they didn't know what he was going to do. If this is how he was acting while he was still alive, what's he going to do now? And he gets up and he says, serve me food. And he goes and worships God. And they're like, what's going on? He says, when he was alive, there was a chance God would have mercy on me. Now I'm just going to get up and do what I'm supposed to do. And that's the mindset that we need to have whenever we look back at our lives and say, boy, that was a mess up. But we can just go forward. We've got calling. We've got purpose. We need to apologize, of course. We need to say that's called repentance, by the way. We need to say, Lord, you're right, I'm wrong. This is not something I should have been involved in. But Lord, by your strength, I never will again. And use me for your glory. And Judah's one of those people to me that highlights that. Because from him would come the son of David, who would sit on his throne. So, Judah sent to bring Joseph to Jacob. Joseph prepared his chariot to meet his father. That, usually it wouldn't be Joseph preparing the chariot. It would be Joseph's staff preparing the chariot. What does this say about Joseph's eagerness? He wants to go see Dad. Judah comes. He says, hey, we're here. And Joseph says, okay, we're on the way. And he goes down, and it's an emotional meeting. Fell upon his neck. Jacob is so overwhelmed. He says, I am willing to die since I am now seeing your face, for you are still alive. Okay. Here's the interesting part. Jacob got to enjoy Joseph 17 years before he was sold into captivity. Jacob would now be able to enjoy Joseph another 17 years before he died. Okay? That's like God saying, I'm just going to bookend your life with 17 years and 17 years of this favorite son from Rachel. It's just it's kind of like the perfection of God. It's like, it's amazing. So, okay, Joseph said to his brothers and to the household of his father, I will go up and inform Pharaoh. I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds who tend a flock, for they have livestock, flocks, cattle, and everything they have brought with them. When it happens that Pharaoh calls you and says, what type of work do you do? You shall say, from our youth even to this day your servants are men who have tended livestock, both we and our fathers. Then you will live in the land of Goshen, for everyone who tends a flock is revolting to the Egyptians. And Egyptian is spelt with an A, not an O, but anyway. That whole thing about revolting, well, okay, we'll talk about it. Joseph emphasizes their role as shepherds. Again, remember, we've already had one instance of the fact that Egyptians would not eat with Canaanites because it was revolting to the Egyptians. And we talked about it at the time. It seriously could be just because the Canaanites ate some of the pet gods of the Egyptians. Yeah, they, some of the things the Egyptians held sacred, the neighbors would eat. Okay, and that's a problem in India right now. You can end up being stoned in India if there's an accusation against you that you've been eating the sacred cows. And so, and it happens. I mean, people are attacked because someone spreads the rumor. You can eat oxen, so that's one of the things that you can buy instead is, oxen, but, to make up for that deeply marbled ribeye you're missing. But but you understand, the Egyptians are thinking, hey, it's a little revolting because you normally eat things that we hold as sacred. Okay, this could be a part of that same thing, but we'll find out maybe someday. By the way, he says he emphasizes their role as shepherds, and he says, just keep repeating this to Pharaoh, because then he's going to send you to Goshen. Because Joseph knows that he has so much favor with Pharaoh and his court, and you were going to see evidence of it. They're already thinking, if these are his brothers, we can work them into our government. We can work them into our structure. We can keep them close to us. And they have the same type of gifting that their brother has. That's going to make Egypt a successful and prosperous place. And so Joseph is trying to keep them separate from that, because remember, this is supposed to be a sojourn. This is supposed to be a temporary residence. And if all of a sudden they are brought into the bureaucracy of Egypt, they're never getting out. They will be assimilated, not kept separate. And they were supposed to, they said right up front, we're here to sojourn, to live as temporary residents. So he makes sure his brothers do exactly the same thing as what he's reciting, and points out that this will help because the idea of shepherds are revolting to the Egyptians. What it was, probably one of those things, where they're looking at them and saying, hey, this is something, you're taking care of animals that we think are, it could be the other way around, the animals themselves are unclean, okay? And so now you take care of animals that are unclean, we don't want to be around you. So that also could be one of the things that's working there. Eating at the table, no doubt, you eat stuff that we don't eat. But now it could simply be that they were taking care of animals the Egyptians thought were unclean, and so it'd be revolting to them. Then Joseph went and informed Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks, their cattle, and all which they have come from the land of Canaan. And look, they are in the land of Goshen. From among all of his brothers he sent for 5 men and placed them before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, what type of work do you do? They responded to Pharaoh, your servants tend to the flock, we and our fathers. Notice they emphasized the sheep part of it. Okay? And that apparently was something they were supposed to do. So Joseph and Pharaoh are together. Pharaoh wants to do the best by Joseph and his brothers, and Joseph realizes this would not be in God's plan, so he's working to stop Pharaoh from being too generous, too nice. And so Joseph and Pharaoh are there. He sets some of his brothers, 5 of his brothers. How did he pick them out? I mean, this is an audience with the big guy in Egypt. Okay? You're picking out the 5 most eloquent ones. You're picking out the ones who are the most careful in their speech. The last thing you want is to have one of your brothers who comes in, "Hey, how you doing there, Pharaoh?" It's just not good. And so he picks out 5 brothers that he knows are not going to embarrass the family name. Y'all understand this that have brothers and sisters, right? I mean, yeah, you understand. So anyway, but so they answer as planned. "Hey, we're the ones, we tend sheep." And they said to Pharaoh, "We have come to live as temporary residents in the land, for there is no pasture for the flock of your servants, because the famine is heavy in the land of Canaan. Now please let your servants live in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Let your father and your brothers live in the best of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. If you know that there is among them worthy men, appoint them as chief herdsmen over the cattle that belong to me." That tells you what Joseph was trying to avoid, because that would have been a bad thing. Okay. So they're very clear. We just want temporary refuge. We're here as sojourners. We're not staying a long time, 430 years. And so they just need a place to stay. And he said, "Go ahead and live in Goshen." Now, when he first started talking to Joseph about where they were supposed to live, he said, "Live in the good parts of the land. Live in the good parts. Eat the best that we have." Now he switches his verbiage, okay? And I know a lot of your English translations, if you read before this section, will say, "The best of the land is before you. The best of the land before." No, it's the good areas of the land. It's tov. It means good. Okay? Doesn't mean the best. It means good. But now the word he uses here, he does switch to the idea of the best. His generosity is overflowing now that they are there. And he says, "Now come and live in the best of the land," presenting Goshen as if it's the best part of the land for shepherds. If it was the best part of the land for bureaucrats, they would have lived there. But it's the best part for people who kept cattle. So they can go live in Goshen. And then he says, "Hey, if you know of anyone that you can put to work in the government, feel free." Again, here's this thing. They know the talent of Joseph. And if Joseph is that talented, they understand that his brothers could be. And I don't know if Joseph ever put any of his brothers in that position, but if you became chief shepherd to Pharaoh, that was a significant, or chief livestock keeper, that's a significant role and puts you into the bureaucracy and in the government. And it would not be a sojourning moment. It would be a being assimilated moment. And so I doubt that happened. But you can see that this is one of the things that God had to protect them from. And in the same way, we're going to read as we get into the book of Exodus that the Israelites, I'm sure, were very comfortable in the land of Goshen. I would have been. You would have been. It's some of the best areas of the land of Egypt. This is an awesome place to live. And so God had to make some changes so that the Israelites were ready to leave again. Because that's a big deal. It was a big deal for them to come down from Canaan, but that was a famine that got them to come. And the fact that Joseph was put into that place, and now to get them back again, well, that's what the book of Exodus is about. Everything that caused them to want to depart from the land of Egypt and go on up and enter back into the promised land that had been given to them. So we, as we see God working with these guys, it helps us understand how he works with us. Sometimes the negative circumstances that we have in our lives, we don't see God's purpose in it the same way that he does. There are times that we go through troubles that are designed to help us get to a certain place in our life. And those troubles will mold us and shape us or move us into an arena that we would never have moved in previously. And so the Lord is using all things to shape our purpose. And we see that so clearly in this story as God first uses the famine to get them out of Canaan, and then he uses the lack of goodwill in Egypt and all of the problems they have as a result of that to get them back to Canaan. But in both instances, it's a pressure cooker that gets them to move. It would have been nice if they just got a little note from the Lord. It's time to move. Right? I remember once, this is when we still lived in Margate. So that was back in 2008. I remember it was you all remember what was going on in 2008? There were houses everywhere. House values were going, wow. And we were very comfortable in our house in Margate. We liked our house in Margate. Margate, great neighborhood, great for the kids. And Dawn's standing at the sink one day, and we had a wide open plan, so kitchen and dining and living room were all together. And all of a sudden, and we didn't think this was really weird, me and the kids, because it's fairly common. Dawn suddenly doubles over and goes, "Whoa!" So we're kind of over in the family room area, and we look over, and she looks at me and says, "It's time to move." And I said, "Could you explain that a little bit more?" It's time to move. That's what I heard. And it came with so much power, it caused her to double over and yell. Okay, now, I already told you the time frame. It's 2008. House prices are going, okay. And it's not, you really don't want to sell your house and move. You just don't. This is not a great time for that. You want everything to recover. You want things to happen. But God had a plan that I was unaware of, and, we needed to move. Okay, and I was like, okay. And so we put our house on the market for a year, okay, because there was no one buying homes. We had people looking, but, here's one of the things that happened in right before 2008. Everybody and his brother refinanced their homes at a very high level and remodeled those homes. So they had new kitchens, new bathrooms, new everything in their homes because of the fact that they had taken second mortgages or whatever, refied their homes. We had not done that, which means everyone came into our house and said, "Let me see, the kitchen needs to be remodeled, the bathrooms need to be remodeled." They were great. They just weren't up to the latest specs. And so we were not in a place that we could, compete with some of the houses that were out there that were upside down and short sales. Okay. We were not in any, our house was, we had not repeatedly refied the house and taken all the equity out over all the years that things were going up. I mean, we bought that house for like $100,000, $108,000 in 1995, and that neighborhood eventually in the pre-2008 era had gone up to like $450,000. Now, here's my question. Lord, if we were supposed to move, couldn't you have done it when the neighborhood really was selling for $450,000? Anyway. So, for a year, no one made an offer on our house except one couple. And years earlier, the Lord had given us a word that two people with the first names of this couple, would be living in our house one day. Now, at the time he gave us the word, they were members of our congregation with that name, and we just thought, it meant they're going to be really close in ministry and stuff like that, right? Well, it turns out this couple offers us a ridiculously low price. And I'm like, no, I'm not selling this house to this couple for that money. They want me to drop $50,000, for their first offer. And I went, no, I'm not dropping $50,000. Did I have the equity to drop $50,000? Yes. Did I want to lose $50,000 like that? Heavens no. Okay, that's not happening. After about 3 or 4 or 5 months, they came back again. And they're the only offer we have. And I know I've got the Lord saying it's time to move. And I finally went, okay. Now, we didn't know the first names of the couple at that time yet. And so the couple comes back and we go, okay, we'll sell it to you. Okay. You know, you understand, I'm not losing money, but it's painful. Okay. It's really painful. And so I end up selling the house to them. We didn't know their names until they came and inspected the house, the final inspection before the sale and all that sort of stuff. And what happens is our pool light had never worked. And so I knew that when the inspection comes that the pool is going to be dinged because the pool light isn't working. And so I'm outside watching the inspector go around, and he hits the light switch and the light in the pool comes on. And I'm standing outside now like this, just staring at the pool with this light on. I'm going, okay, because you know what's going through my mind. Couldn't we have gotten this fixed earlier, Lord? You know, it was. And so we're sitting there, and then all of a sudden Dawn comes out to me, and I'm looking at this light on in the pool, and I'm thinking to myself, Dawn comes out and says, did you know the first names of the couple? And I said, no. She gives me the names. It's the name of the people that the Lord said would be living in our house. So we knew he had used the couple that was no longer with us at the time in our congregation, but he used their names to be able to show us that when we got to this point, this was him. Now we knew beyond any doubt, even at that ridiculously low price, and it wasn't, again, compared to what I bought it for, it was okay. But I saw the Lord, what he was doing. And we ended up selling the house and, moving to a temporary location. It wasn't 430 years. And then we end up in Coral Springs. And let's see, 2009 is when we moved into that house. And it was in 2015 the Lord spoke to me that I needed to run for office. And I needed to live in Coral Springs to do that. He actually told me the office and the name of the person that I was supposed to be running for the seat for. And I had to live where we were living in order for that to work. So he, in advance, set that up. Now, by the way, if he's setting all that up, I would have preferred that I would have won the race. But that wasn't part of his plan. Because you know what? Guess what? What happens if you win the race? You got to actually do the job. And that, I'm not even sure my calling is that, to do that type of administrative stuff. You know how boring those meetings are? I go to a lot of them, by the way, or used to. I used to go to a lot of the meetings, the council meetings and the preparation meetings and all those things. And I would watch that and go, you could just, it was awful, just saying. So the purpose wasn't to win that particular race. It was to become influential in the community. I'm well aware of that. And, in hindsight, when I ran a race, I ran it to win. That's what you do. Otherwise, don't put your hand to anything. You're not going to actually put some work into it and make it go after it. But the Lord used a word and then the pressure cooker of no one making offers to get it into the right hands of the right people, so we moved at the right time, and that move at the time that we moved made certain that we ended up in one of the most glorious places that we've ever lived. Okay, I mean, that was the Lord. We just walked around for a lot of years thinking, how did we end up here? Okay, I mean, it was amazing in Coral Springs. That's another story, though, so I'm not going to get into it today. Okay, God works through all sorts of stuff in our lives. We see that in the life of here, of the group in front of us today with Joseph and his brothers, and we see it in our own lives all the time. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this opportunity as we've studied your word together to be reminded about how you work in our lives. I ask that as we are walking through our lives, that we're able to be reminded again and again that when you speak, 100 billion failures disappear, and that you use all our circumstances to move us along the road. In your name, Jesus, amen.